Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to start taking a look at Venus's upcoming conjunction to Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. Now, we're doing this after starting our week by looking at Mars's conjunction to Pluto, which today is very much, it's still active. So you might want to go back, and if you're really feeling the Mars-Pluto dynamic, look at Monday and Tuesday's videos this week. If you haven't listened to them already, or if you need to go back and check in on the archetypal significations of Mars Pluto or the horoscopes. We're going to move on today to start looking at the major transit coming in over the weekend. You'll start feeling this today and tomorrow on the heels of Mars Pluto, and that's Venus conjoined with Pluto. And also Mercury's square to Uranus, which is happening almost at the exact same time. So we're going to start looking at that today. Today we're going to look at it from the standpoint of the big picture, like how can we contextualize Venus-Pluto's conjunction based on the other things that are happening? For example, the big one being Mercury square to Uranus. But we'll look at some other factors as well that sort of give us clues as to the unique flavor of this Venus-Pluto conjunction. So that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to smash, hit, tap, dance your toe onto the like button. We got to come up with new ones. So maybe there'll be like an award for the best adjective you can put into the comments description for how to lovingly assert your like. Anyway, we really do appreciate when you press the like button. It helps the channel to grow. When you share your comments, it creates community. It also helps the channel to grow. You can find a transcript of any of my daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. Guess what? Tomorrow night, we have a webinar that I am hosting. I'd like to take you over to the website and tell you about it. When you go over to nightlightastrology.com, you click on the live events tab or go to the events menu drop down. You'll see live events there as well. Either way, you click on that, you go over, and you're going to find a series of webinars that I'm doing, one in February, one in March, and one in April. They are all one-off evening webinars. You don't have to, they're not like a series. You don't have to attend them in order to you could attend any of them and they stand alone. But they're all connected insofar as we're looking at the outer planets and the role they play in the significations of love, sex, marriage, relationships, romance. The first in the series, that is this Thursday night from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, is called Pluto in Love. We're going to look at the way that Pluto shows up in both natal charts and by transit to the natal chart when it is affecting the topics of love and relationships. And we're going to talk about what it does, why it does it, how to work with it, how to not be afraid of it on some level too. And then in March, we're going to do the same thing for Neptune, and in April for Uranus. So this is a series. You could participate in all three of them or any of them if they interest you. They're for students of all levels, so be very accessible for people of all levels, specific enough to be interesting to advanced students, accessible enough for beginners as well. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time this Thursday night, tomorrow night. It's $20 to register. When you do register, you get a link sent to you so that you can attend live. But if you can't make it live, then afterward, we send you a link to the recording. And we do that for all three of these talks. So I hope to see some of you there. Any questions, feel free to email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. All right, so let's take a look at Venus's upcoming conjunction to Pluto and the simultaneous Mercury-Uranus square. So I'm going to back this up to Friday, February 16th, and I want to just illustrate what's happening. So you'll, first of all, notice in the background, we have Mars and Pluto about 2 degrees apart. So they're like, they've done their thing, and now it's Venus's turn. And you can see here on Friday, February 16th, that Venus is just about to enter Aquarius. And as it does so, will immediately conjoin Pluto. So let's move this forward a day from February 16th, Friday, to the 17th, at which point you'll see that Venus has gone all the way over Pluto and is now just separating from Pluto by Saturday morning. So this is February 16th and 17th as the major dates, but you could be feeling this starting today. Certainly tomorrow. So let's just back this up a bit. So here's, it's about 2 degrees off as of Thursday, February 15th. Friday, it's within a degree. You're going to be feeling the actual conjunction on Friday into Saturday, the 17th. And then we give it about 3 degrees of separation. It'll be around till about Monday, February 19th, where you're really noticing it. Now, all of that being said, what I want to do today, because we're going to take a separate look at Venus-Pluto as in an archetypal vacuum, probably tomorrow. And by the way, I have a grabbed episode in queue, but I'm waiting until this logjam of major transits passes through and we have a little bit of a lull, because there's so many important transits to cover right now that I just keep waiting for the right time to pop a storytelling episode in. But I do have a good one for us, and I'll do that when this major stream of transits just kind of calms down a little bit. So we have a very interesting combination. At the exact same time that Venus is doing her thing Friday and Saturday, I want you to notice that at the exact same time, we have Mercury in Aquarius going through a square to Uranus and Taurus. So let's forward this a day, and you'll see that by Friday to Saturday, Mercury is also going through the square to Uranus. So they are simultaneous events. Two transits that perfect at once can't help but be involved with each other, especially when you've got two of those planets in the same sign. One of them is, of course, hitting Uranus and Taurus, so it's kind of involving the entire Jupiter-Uranus dynamic that's in the process of shaping there, which is so much the work of the month. So many aspects from Aquarius to Taurus over and over again. Venus and Pluto together are not, they're not quite reaching in to touch anything in Taurus yet, but Venus will. And so this conjunction is a part of a deeper process that's happening as the month of February unfolds. And it's important to put all of that into context. And so we're going to do that kind of bigger picture contextualizing today. And then tomorrow we'll look a little bit more at Venus, Pluto in a vacuum. It's helpful to do both, So, all right. So now that we have that in mind, I'm going to tell you about some of the contextual factors that make this what it is, and clue us in as to what specific kind of Venus-Pluto dynamic we're looking at, because they're all very different depending on the total context in the sky. All right, first of all, there's a very strong emphasis on Saturn and Mercury in the sky right now, behind and within the Venus-Pluto conjunction. Let's take a look. I'll put the chart back up on the screen. I want you to notice that, first of all, the Venus-Pluto dynamic is happening in Aquarius, which is Saturn's domicile. So they're in a power of Saturn, and they're in the bound of Mercury. So first of all, we have two of the, two dignity categories to consider. I love looking at the combination of dignities because they really show us, well, something's getting together in Aquarius. What other planet is toning or conditioning the way that they're, Venus and Pluto in this case, are expressing themselves? So we know that there's a strong emphasis on Saturn and Mercury. I think that, first of all, that is really fascinating. The reason that it should be fascinating to us is that as these two planets are meeting in the bound of Mercury, do we have any reason to believe that Mercury is something to pay attention to in the sky right now? Yes, we do, because Mercury, the bound ruler of the Venus-Pluto conjunction, is going through a square to Uranus. Now, I mentioned that in a separate point. I think I don't mention that until point 6, that Mercury is simultaneously hitting a square to Uranus, but that's part of what I'm about to say. So there's a very strong emphasis on Saturn and Mercury in the heart of the Venus-Pluto conjunction. Now, in the meantime, we have to notice a few other things about Mercury. What is Mercury doing right now? What is Saturn doing right now? First of all, Mercury is combust, which means that Mercury has moved to within about 8 degrees of the sun. And when it's within 8 degrees of the sun and moving in direct motion to catch the sun, it is in its combustion phase, which means it is dying and being reborn into the evening star position from the morning star position. That process there's a kind of death and rebirth for Mercury. Well, a death and rebirth for Mercury that has just begun as Mercury is squaring Uranus. Okay, now we're talking, now we're cooking. And we know that this Venus-Pluto dynamic is somehow tied to Mercury's sort of Uranian moment here, as well as its combustion and the process of it beginning to reset itself as an evening star. Okay, so we're going to synthesize this in a little bit. First, we're just pointing out the details. Number 3 is that Saturn is also combust. Now, out of sign combustion, people debate about, but I mean, by Monday, February 19th, the sun is in Pisces and within 8 degrees of Saturn, which means Saturn is an old Saturn that is also about to die and be reborn. So we have, interestingly enough, Venus conjoining Pluto in the bound of Mercury and the domicile of Saturn, while both Mercury and Saturn are going through the reset of their synodic cycles with the Sun. That is very significant. Now we have reason to believe that the dignity that is behind the Venus Pluto conjunction is, in fact, not just meaningful because we should always pay attention to dignities, but meaningful because the particular dignity rulers, Mercury and Saturn, are going through major resets at the time that Venus conjoins Pluto. So the Venus Pluto conjunction is tied intimately, this kind of death and rebirth process for Saturn and Mercury. Okay, again, we're just putting details together. We'll synthesize them in a bit. Number 4, let's take a look at what's happening with this reset. First of all, look at what else is happening with Saturn. As Saturn's going through the reset with the Sun, the death and rebirth, it is in incredibly strong dignities of Venus. So while Venus is in the domicile of Saturn, Saturn is in the bound of Venus and the exaltation of Venus in Pisces. So this means that the two planets are really quite intimately connected to each other right now. Venus's death and rebirth conjoined with Pluto is also it is also responding to a death and rebirth that Saturn itself is going through. So actually, we have a kind of Venus-Saturn theme behind the Venus-Pluto conjunction. That makes it very specific. That's where we start getting a really specific set of themes and ideas from. Let's move on and notice just a few other peripheral details. Number 5, Jupiter is in the bound of Mercury. This is fascinating. Look at this. So here's Jupiter. It's in Venus's sign. So again, we have such an emphasis on Venus as we have for a while. But now Jupiter is in the bound of Mercury. I think this is also really fascinating because Venus or Jupiter has just moved out of Venus's bound and into Mercury's bound. And at the same time, we have as we have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction coming slowly together in the sky right now, by late April, it will be taking shape. We also have this idea that Jupiter, look at what happens right after, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. Venus, right after conjoining Pluto, starts going into a square with Jupiter. And Jupiter is also in the bound of Mercury, and Mercury is about to enter its fall, its detriment, as it moves into Pisces, and it is already sort of combust out of sign, but it'll become more intensely combust as it moves into its fall and detriment. And at the same time that Saturn is going through its synodic reset with the Sun. Again, these little details are super important because they start giving us a picture of the specific kind of transformation that's taking place. And I'll show you how the synthesis works again in a minute, in case it's like getting over your head. Now, finally, the most important thing is that, again, Venus and Pluto conjoining in the power of Mercury and in the power of Saturn mostly. And we also see that at that exact time that the Venus-Pluto conjunction happens, Mercury is going through its death and rebirth and squaring Uranus in Taurus. So, and you have just interesting little connections, like Uranus and Taurus is in the bound of Jupiter, Jupiter's in the bound of Mercury, Mercury squaring Uranus, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, so now how do we synthesize all of that information? And if you could follow even part of that, that's good. Well, we start synthesizing it by saying, look, this is actually, I'm going to keep this up just so you can keep looking at it, and maybe that'll help the synthesis along a little bit. I'm going to back this up so we see the two planets conjoining. And here's what we're saying. We're saying that, remember what air signs represent, especially Aquarius, a Saturnian, masculine, sort of solid or fixed air sign. It represents thought structures, ideas, systems of information, technology, paradigmatic or ideological frameworks. And Aquarius loves to shift the narrative by shifting the way we look at reality, the way we look at each other, the way we think about things, the way we idealize and move toward a different kind of future, or compare the past and the present, or the future and the present. But it is big ideas in Aquarius. So when Venus comes into Aquarius and conjoins Pluto, like one of the very first things that we can see happening, because Venus is in the bound of Mercury, is that Venus is looking for new ideas. And these ideas, from the standpoint of Venus, should be beautiful. They should be conducive to happiness. They should create harmony and flow in our relationships. They should create aesthetic pleasure, sensual enjoyment, luxury, wealth, beauty, happiness in the material world. But we need different ideas, different thoughts, different structures of mind in order to create or provide for those ideas. That is a very basic Venus conjoined Pluto at the 0 degree marker of Aquarius, especially considering that not long ago we had Jupiter Saturn conjoined at that degree in Aquarius. So Venus is coming in and saying, these are the ideas that I think will lead to beauty, happiness, joy, harmony, flow, etc. However, in order for those ideas to take place with Pluto, death must occur, destruction, dismantling, purging, healing, purifying, the removal of unwanted or unnecessary material, the sudden eruption of unconscious material that helps us clearly see where we need to go and what happiness looks like in contrast to unconscious material that's perhaps been blocking us or keeping us from happiness. And it's all happening probably on some level with respect to bigger ideas or structures of thought or paradigms, things like that. So now, from that standpoint, look at the emphasis on Mercury. Well, Mercury's hitting a square to Uranus. Light bulb moments, epiphanies, new ideas that blast through at light speed, that hit like lightning, an original thought, a freeing up of mental energy, right? So now we can see Venus Pluto correlating with Mercury square Uranus. Uranus, where is Uranus? Uranus is in Taurus, in Venus's sign. So some reception with Venus, who wants beauty, who wants a breakthrough when it comes to ideas that recreate and help to generate more spaciousness, more beauty, more flow, a more aesthetically sound and luxurious space, etc. So Venus is really asserting herself through a lot of different avenues right now. And we can see that with Uranus and Taurus in Venus's sign, Uranus in the bound of Jupiter, Jupiter in the bound of Mercury, that we are talking about ideas that have to shift or change in order to accommodate the vision of Venus. Now, when we see Mercury also going through the synodic reset, the death and rebirth, which will take Mercury, by the way, into Pisces, where Mercury will be in its detriment and its fall as it goes through combustion and Cazimi and reset. And oh, by the way, the ruler of Aquarius, Saturn, is also going through that same reset in strong dignities of Venus. Okay, now we have a whole second layer of information that's really interesting. It might be a little painful to find the right ways to implement this change. This change of mind, this change of idea, this change of aesthetic, this change of organization, the structural modes of thought and the plans or the blueprints that are changing, this might be, although it's ideal, although we can see exactly where we need to go and there might be excitement in the air, this kind of transformation, just par for the course for Pluto, par for the course for the combustion of Mercury, the combustion of Saturn. This might hurt a little. This might involve some letting go. This might involve a kind of spirit of melancholy. This may involve a process that requires emotional tact and sensitivity that can't be rushed. This may also involve being gentle. I was just, as you guys know, who watch my channel regularly, I just helped say goodbye to our 11-year-old dog. She passed, and we had something like a home hospice care service that came for animals and helped her transition. And I will tell you, it was a strange thing to be in the process of grieving and letting go. And that process, while is also very healing and lightening, and I talked about this last week, and I was experiencing a lot of insights and growth and sort of sudden dramatic shifts that were very liberating and enlightening. But I also had to be very careful that I stayed present for my beloved animal who was passing and not rush by that, even though there was healing and kind of like a lot of light bulbs going off during the process. I don't know how else to describe that, but sometimes when grief and pain are present, there's almost a kind of manic creative downloading that's happening, while at the same time, you're in the midst of something that is just really painstaking and difficult. I get the feeling given the emphasis on the transitioning, transforming Mercury and Saturn behind Venus and Pluto's conjunction, especially given that transition is going to take place in Pisces, which can be a very difficult place for Mercury, that we may have the blueprint or the shift of idea, or we may see the most beautiful possibility, but it may take some real emotional tact and patience and care and sensitivity. We may, in order to implement the changes in front of us, we may have to have very clear, steady boundaries, mentally and emotionally, and we may have to steward or midwife, like a death doula, the process of something letting go so that this new exciting thing can come forth. And if the excitement dominates the letting go, the seed that we're planting will be immature somehow, and it won't yield the kind of fruit that we want. That's what I'm really seeing in all of this. It's interesting because the first decan of Pisces, I was reading Susan T. Chang's book. Is that her name, Susan? Susan Chang. And she has a book on the decans called 36 Secrets. And I was reading about the first decan of Pisces, where we have the sun moving into the conjunction with Saturn. We have Mercury. I'll just advance it so you can see. So you see how Mercury enters Pisces, and we have the sun going through the conjunction along with Mercury and Saturn all together. So we've got like a double cazimi of the sun, Mercury, and Saturn by February 28th, all in that first decan of Pisces. And the card that she associated, let me actually pull up the visual of the card. And I believe Austin Coppock might associate the exact same card with the first decan of Pisces. But anyway, let me just put it up on the screen so that you can see it. There it is. So this card is really, let's see if I can even like. So this card is the card that has been associated with the first decan of Pisces. Now, the decans are very, very ancient, and they have a lot of different interesting associations made with them. And this has been the card that has been associated with the decan traditionally. And it's about letting go. It's about the process of moving on to new things by virtue of coming to the space of surrender and releasing. There's been a lot that's come through something, and it's time to let it go. It's a grieving and it's a mourning. And isn't it interesting that it's happening in the bound of Venus and the exaltation of Venus as Venus is coming off the conjunction to Pluto in Aquarius? It's as though a beautiful new idea requires a very deep level of actually mourning and grieving the loss of something else. So that's why I like looking at the little contextual details. And this year I've been spending more time occasionally just taking you into it with me so that it's not just behind the scenes that I do these kinds of things. I mean, look at what's happening at the exact same time that we finally get to this moment of death and rebirth for Mercury and Saturn, who are the major dignity rulers of the Venus-Pluto conjunction. When they're all resetting at cazimi around February 28th, look at what Venus is doing. Whoops. Let me just go back one, get my arrow. Venus is now just having crossed the square to Jupiter and going right to Uranus. All of these planets are in the sign of Jupiter and Venus. So this beautiful idea, it's kind of like the star card in tarot. Like there's just a beautiful idea that's being born right now. That's very Venusian, very Taurian. It's ultimately about happiness and a more stable, harmonious, beautiful kind of experience that we're trying to create space and room for right now. But the price we pay is a kind of melancholic reset. There's a very deep letting go that comes before this kind of garden. The image of like building a garden comes to my mind. You have to let go very deeply of a few things here, and that the tears are like fertilizing this very Venusian thing that's being developed. It's very beautiful. It's very nuanced, and I hope that you were able to follow it. So anyway, fascinating images to think about. One of the things I love about the Eight of Cups is that it says, like, if you can be brave in letting go of things, there's actually so much more ahead. The Nine of Cups and the 10 are places of tremendous fulfillment and inner emotional and even material opulence, wealth, surplus, fertility, and happiness. But we can't get there until there's this kind of deeper melancholic reset that has to happen. And that's coming through. That's going to come through the rest of this month and trailing off a little bit into the beginning of March. And then we're on a runway, because by the time we get to the end of April, then that Jupiter-Uranus dynamic comes through in Taurus, and it's very expansive. So anyway, we'll look at Venus and Pluto in a vacuum tomorrow and just kind of what is Venus-Pluto all about, and help refine our approach in that way. So I hope this was useful for you today. Don't forget, we've got a webinar tomorrow night. Check it out on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Go to the live events tab. You can register and join us for a talk on Venus and Pluto, which is appropriate since they're coming together this week. And I hope to see you there. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.